I never thought a gym membership could be the thing that shattered my marriage. It started small. Kate had always been fit, but ever since she joined Iron Haven Fitness, something changed. She went from working out 3 times a week to practically living at the gym. If she wasn't lifting weights, she was doing Pilates. If not Pilates, then spin class. She became obsessed. Protein shakes, macros, counting steps. At first, I was supportive. I mean, who was I to complain if my wife wanted to be healthier? But it wasn't just about fitness. She became distant, distracted. Her phone was suddenly always on silent, and whenever I asked how her workouts went, she gave vague answers. Then, I noticed the texts. Late at night, her phone would buzz, and she'd quickly turn the screen away. When I casually glanced at the notifications, I saw a name that made my stomach twist. Martin Davis, my boss. At first, I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was about work. Maybe it was innocent. But then I started seeing the patterns. The way she smiled at her phone. The way she suddenly had late-night gym sessions on nights when Martin conveniently worked late. The thought of it gnawed at me until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I decided to follow her. A trail of deception. Wednesday night, Kate kissed me on the cheek and told me she had a HIIT session that would go late. As soon as she drove off, I followed. She went to the gym, all right, but instead of walking through the front entrance, she parked in the back near a side door. A few minutes later, another car pulled up. A sleek black BMW Martin's car. My heart pounded as I watched them disappear inside together. I felt sick, angry, but I needed proof. I waited, my fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. After 40 minutes, the side door cracked, open, and they emerged. Kate's hair was damp, her skin glowing, but it wasn't just from the workout. Martin touched her lower back as they walked to their cars. She laughed at something he said, something that made my stomach churn. That night, I barely slept. The next morning at work, Martin strolled in like he hadn't been sneaking around with my wife. I wanted to confront him right there, but I needed more than just suspicion. So, I dug deeper. The setup I went to Iron Haven Fitness that night, pretending I was interested in joining. The receptionist was friendly, and after some small talk, I asked about personal trainers. "Are there any you'd recommend?" She grinned. "Kate's one of our best trainers." My blood ran cold. My wife wasn't just working out. She was working here, and she never told me. I played dumb. "Oh, wow. Does she train a lot of clients?" "She has a few regulars," the receptionist said. "But she spends most of her time with Mr. Davis. They have like this intense training schedule." That was all I needed to hear. The next night, I told Kate I was working late. Instead, I parked down the street from the gym and waited. Sure enough, Martin's car was there. I sneaked around the side and found a window. Inside, Kate and Martin weren't lifting weights. They were deep in conversation, their faces serious. Then something unexpected happened. Martin pulled out an envelope and handed it to her. She hesitated, then nodded. Money? Blackmail? What the hell was going on? The truth no one saw coming. I needed answers. The next morning, I confronted Kate. "I followed you," I said, watching her face carefully. "I know about you and Martin." Her eyes widened, but instead of guilt, I saw something else. Fear. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Then explain," I said, my voice cold. She took a deep breath. "Martin's been laundering money through the company. I found out by accident. He needed somewhere to hide cash, and he offered me a cut if—" I kept quiet. He figured no one would suspect a personal trainer. I stared at her. "So you've been working with him?" "No," she said quickly. I pretended to go along with it so I could gather proof. I didn't know whether to believe her, but then she pulled out her phone and showed me something. Screenshots, emails, bank transfers, evidence. My world flipped again. Martin wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was using her. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. I wanted to protect you, she said. And I didn't know who to trust. I exhaled sharply. What now? She hesitated. I was thinking, maybe we go to the police. Together. The final move that night, we set the trap. Kate texted Martin, saying she wanted out. He told her to meet him at a private location, an abandoned warehouse. That's where we went, but not alone. We had already tipped off the police. Martin arrived, smug and confident, but the moment he handed over another envelope, the cops swarmed in. The look on his face when the cuffs snapped around his wrists, priceless. The scandal blew up. Martin lost everything, his money, his job, his freedom. The night Martin was arrested, I thought that would be the end of it. Justice served, my marriage saved, and life moving forward. But I underestimated the reach of a man like Martin Davis. The ghost of Martin Davis, a week after the arrest, my life almost felt normal again. Kate and I were talking more, reconnecting, trying to heal. The company distanced itself from Martin, and the higher-ups assured everyone that business would continue as usual. Then, the calls started. Unknown numbers. No one on the other end. One night, I answered. At first, just silence. Then, a low voice. You think this is over? Click. A chill ran through me. I checked the prison records. Martin was behind bars. So who the hell was calling me? I told Kate about it, and she went pale. I've been getting them too, she admitted. That's when I knew. Martin might have been locked up, but his influence was still out there. The break-in. Few days later, I came home late and immediately knew something was wrong. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the place was trashed. Drawers pulled out, couch cushions slashed, papers scattered. Someone had been searching for something. Then I saw it. A note, taped to the fridge. Where is it? That's when it hit me. Martin had hidden something valuable, and whoever had broken in thought Kate and I had it. I called Kate. Did Martin ever give you anything? She hesitated. Just the envelopes with money. Are you sure? Silence. Then she whispered, Wait. There was one thing, a locker key. My pulse quickened. Where is it? She dug through her purse and pulled it. Out, a small, ordinary key, a number etched onto it, on 45. I took a deep breath. We need to find that locker. A dangerous discovery. The number led us to a storage facility on the outskirts of town. It was late, the parking lot empty. Kate and I slipped inside, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Locker number 145 was at the end of the hall. I inserted the key, heart pounding. Inside, we found a briefcase. Kate and I exchanged a look. I unlatched it. Stacks of cash, a burner phone, a flash drive. My hands trembled as I picked up the drive. This is it, I murmured. This is what they're after. Kate's. Phone buzzed. She looked down and went pale. Another unknown number. The message. We know you have it. And then another. If you want to live, bring it to us. Midnight. Pier 17. Come alone. The exchange. There was no way in hell we were going alone. I contacted Detective Monroe, the officer who handled Martin's case. He agreed to set up a sting operation. That night, Kate and I drove to Pier 17. The docks were quiet, shadows stretching under the dim lights. I gripped the briefcase, my pulse hammering. A black SUV pulled up. 2 men stepped out. Suits, cold eyes. The kind of guys who didn't ask twice before pulling a trigger. Where's the drive? One of them asked. I held it up. Where's our guarantee? We walk away? The man smirked. You don't get one. I swallowed hard, then flashing lights, sirens. The men spun around as police swarmed the pier, guns drawn, shouts. One of them tried to run. A cop tackled him. The other, he pulled a gun. aimed. At Kate, time slowed. I lunged, knocking him off balance. The gun fired, missing Kate by inches. Seconds later, he was pinned to the ground, cuffs snapping shut. It was over. For real this time. Freedom. The flash drive contained everything: offshore accounts, blackmail material, proof of Martin's deeper crimes. With it, the police dismantled his entire operation. Martin, he got an even longer sentence, and Kate and I, we finally got to breathe. We moved to a new city, left the past behind. No more secrets, no more lies, just us, and this time, nothing would come between us. Not a gym, not a boss, and definitely not Martin Davis. The end. A new city. A fresh start. Kate and I had put the past behind us, or at least we thought we had. But secrets don't stay buried forever, and some ghosts refuse to rest. A familiar shadow life had finally settled. No more late-night calls. No more looking over our shoulders. I got a new job in marketing. Kate started personal training at a small boutique gym, and for the first time in years, things felt normal. Until one evening, Kate came home, her face pale. "You're not going to believe this," she said, her voice unsteady. She handed me her phone. An email from unknown subject. "You thought it was over?" The message was short. "You took something from us. We want it back. Tick-tock." My skin went cold. "Who sent this?" I whispered. Kate shook her head. "I don't know." "But it came from an encrypted account. Someone serious." I clenched my jaw. "Martin's in prison. His men were arrested. This doesn't make sense." Kate hesitated. "Unless we missed something. The missing piece that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my mind. The briefcase, the flash drive, the arrests. And then it hit me. There was one thing we never checked, Martin's burner phone. I bolted out of bed and found the box where I had stashed it months ago. The police had gotten the financial records from the drive, but what if the real secret was still in here? I powered it on. The screen flickered, then a message appeared. "Enter passcode." I tried Martin's birthday. No luck. I tried Kate's birthday. Nothing. Then I thought back to his arrogance, his ego. I typed Martin. The screen unlocked, and what I found made my stomach drop. Dozens of messages, conversations with names I didn't recognize. But one thread stood out. Unknown. "Shipment will be at the docks. Usual drop point." Martin. "Understood. Payment secured." I scrolled further. More shipments, codes, numbers. This wasn't just money laundering, this was human trafficking. My hands shook. Kate, who had been reading over my shoulder, whispered, "Oh my God, we didn't stop him. We just cut off one head of the snake. We thought we were free. We were wrong. Nowhere left to run." The next morning, I called Detective Monroe, but the number was disconnected. I checked online. He was dead. Hit and run. A warning. Turned to Kate. "We're in deeper than we ever realized." Her eyes were wide with fear. "What do we do?" I gritted my teeth. "We finish this. For real this time." I copied everything from the phone onto a secure drive. Names, dates, locations. This was bigger than Martin. This was an entire network. I sent anonymous emails to journalists, the FBI, anyone who could blow this wide open. Then we packed our bags. We needed to disappear before they made us disappear first. The final move. We were almost out the door when Kate's phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. "You should have left it alone." The house went dark. A car pulled up outside. I grabbed Kate's hand. "Run!" We sprinted through the back door as footsteps pounded up our driveway. This wasn't over. Not yet. To be continued. We ran through the backyard, past the neighbor's fence, into the dark streets. Behind us, a car door slammed. Footsteps, voices, "Find them!" Kate's grip tightened around my hand as we ducked into an alley. My heart pounded, adrenaline surging through me. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. They were here to eliminate us. Nowhere is safe. We kept moving, cutting through side streets until we reached the old train station. Shut down. Abandoned. I checked my phone. No service. They jammed the signal, Kate whispered. I exhaled sharply. They planned this. We slipped inside, the metal door groaning shut behind us. Dim light filtered through shattered windows, casting jagged shadows. I pressed my back against the cold concrete wall, listening. Silence. Then, a crunch of footsteps outside. Someone was here. Kate's breathing quickened. I squeezed her hand. Stay quiet. The door creaked open. A flashlight beam swept across the floor. A voice. Calm. Menacing. You should have just walked away. I recognized it instantly. Martin, a ghost. Returns. I felt my blood turn to ice. Martin was supposed to be in prison. We had seen him get sentenced. But now, here he was. Kate's nails dug into my arm. How? She mouthed. I didn't know. Martin took slow, deliberate steps inside, his silhouette towering in the doorway. Behind him, 2 men, both armed. You cost me everything, he said, his voice smooth as ever. My money, my operation, my freedom. But you didn't kill me, and that was your mistake. I clenched my fists. The police are useless, he smirked. You think I didn't have insurance? I bought my way out before I even stepped into my cell. My stomach twisted. Of course, men like Martin didn't serve time. They bought it. He took another step forward. Now, you have something I want. I met his gaze. The phone. His smirk widened. See? You're smarter than you look. I heard Kate shift beside me. She was reaching for something. Slowly, carefully. Martin's eyes flickered to her. Ah, he tisked. No sudden moves, sweetheart. His. Goons raised their guns. Shit! A desperate gamble I needed to stall. You're making a mistake, I said, voice steady. That phone doesn't just have dirt on you, it has everything. Your entire network. I've already sent it to people who can burn it all down. Martin's expression didn't change. Then, he chuckled. You think I don't know how this game works? He said. Information is currency, and right now, you're bankrupt. He stepped closer. Kate moved, fast. She yanked a rusted metal pipe from the floor and swung. It cracked against the nearest goon's knee. He screamed, collapsing. I lunged at the second, slamming his gun hand against the wall. A shot fired, sparking off the concrete. Martin grabbed Kate's wrist, twisted. She gasped in pain. I spun, driving my elbow into Martin's ribs. He grunted, stumbling back. Kate broke free, her breath ragged. We ran, the endgame. We burst onto the train tracks, moonlight spilling over rusted rails. Behind us, Martin shouted, "Find them!" A train horn blared in the distance. I grabbed Kate's hand. "The tunnel! Go!" We sprinted toward the dark opening ahead. The ground rumbled as the train approached. Martin's men fired. Bullets sparked against metal. We dove into the tunnel just as the freight train thundered past, sealing Martin on the other side. Darkness swallowed us. The sound roared in our ears, and then, silence. We had escaped. For now. The final play, we surfaced on the other side of the city, breathless. Martin wasn't just a loose end, he was a ticking bomb. As long as he was alive, we weren't safe. Kate wiped sweat from her brow. "We have to end this." I nodded. No more running, no more hiding. It was time to take Martin Davis down, for good. To be continued. We had escaped. For now. But Martin was still out there. And he wouldn't stop until we were dead. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about ending him. The plan, we spent the next 2 days in hiding. Cheap motels. Cash only. Always. Watching our backs. But hiding wasn't enough. We needed to strike first. Kate and I sat across from each other in a dingy motel room, a single lamp casting shadows on the peeling wallpaper. "He won't stop," she said, voice tight. "I know." I clenched my fists. "So we stop him first," she exhaled. "How?" I grabbed the burner phone, the one Martin had wanted so badly. "This," I said, holding it up. "It's not just evidence, it's leverage." Kate frowned. "He's already killed to keep it buried." "Exactly. Which means he'll do anything to get it back." Her eyes widened. "A trap." I nodded. "Martin wanted the phone? We'd give it to him. The setup. We chose the location carefully. An abandoned factory on the edge of town. Remote, no cameras. We sent Martin a message. I have the phone. No cops, no backup. Just you and me. Midnight, Factory District 1. Chance." It didn't take long for him to reply. "See you soon." That was it. No threats. No bluffs. Just cold certainty. He was coming, and so were we. The showdown midnight. Kate and I crouched on the catwalk above the factory floor, hidden in the shadows. Below us, rusted machinery stood like skeletal remains. Then, the sound of tires. Headlights swept across the cracked concrete. A black SUV rolled to a stop. Martin stepped out. Alone. Or so he wanted us to think. I spotted movement in the darkness. His men circling the building, typical. Martin's voice echoed through the empty space. "All right," he called. "Let's end this." Stepped forward, phone in hand. Kate stayed hidden. "You want it?" I said, holding up the device. "Come get it." Martin smirked. "Brave," he said, stepping closer. "Or stupid." He nodded once. His men moved. The double-cross eye was ready for them. Before they could get close, Kate hit the switch. High above, a massive metal beam came crashing down, right onto Martin's SUV. The explosion of glass and steel sent his men scattering. In the chaos, I ran. Martin snarled, pulling a gun. "Not this time," he shouted, firing. I dove behind a rusted conveyor belt. Bullets ricocheted. Kate flanked him from the side, a metal pipe in hand. She swung. Hard. It cracked against Martin's wrist. He screamed, dropping the gun. I tackled him. We crashed onto the factory floor, rolling through dust and debris. His fists swung wildly, desperate, sloppy. I dodged, drove my knee into his ribs. He gasped. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He was losing. The end of Martin Davis. I grabbed the phone from my pocket and held it up. "You think I didn't make copies?" I panted. "This is going public, Martin. Every name, every deal, the whole damn empire you built, gone." His eyes flickered. "Calculating." Then he lunged. Kate was faster. She grabbed his own gun from the floor and aimed it at him. "Don't!" she warned. Martin froze. For the first time since this nightmare began, he was truly powerless. I could have pulled the trigger. I wanted to. But I didn't need to. I stepped back. "You're done." Sirens wailed in the distance. This time, Martin wasn't buying his way out. This time, he was going away forever. Freedom. The next morning, the news broke. The files. The evidence. The truth. Martin's entire operation collapsed. Arrests were made. The network was dismantled. And just like that, we were free. No more running. No more fear. Just a new life. A real one. Kate and I stood on a beach watching the sunrise. "We made it," she whispered. I took her hand. "For good this time," I said. "The past was behind us, and the future, ours to write. The end." Sunlight glistened on the waves as Kate and I stood on the beach, breathing in the salty air. It was over. Finally, truly over. Or so we thought. One last message. A week later, we were in a small cafe halfway across the country. A new town, new names, a fresh start. Kate was laughing at something on her phone when she suddenly stopped. Her face paled. "What is it?" I asked. She turned the screen toward me. "A message. From an unknown number. Did you really think it was that easy?" A photo was attached, a picture of me and Kate, sitting in that very cafe. The game isn't over. My stomach dropped. I scanned the room. Families, tourists, a waitress pouring coffee. No one looked suspicious, but someone was watching. Kate whispered, "Martin's in prison. His men are either dead or locked up. Who could—" I didn't let her finish. I clicked on the sender's profile. No name, no number. Just a single icon, a chess piece, a black king. And then I knew. Martin wasn't the top of the pyramid. He was just a pawn. We hadn't cut off the head of the snake. We had only woken the real monster. Kate met my eyes, her hands, shaking. "What do we do?" I exhaled slowly. "We find them first." A new game had begun, and this time, we wouldn't run. To be continued. Martin was a pawn. The real mastermind, the one pulling the strings, was still out there, watching, waiting, and he had just made his first move. The ghost in the machine. We left the cafe immediately, slipping through the back alley and disappearing into the city streets. "This isn't over," Kate muttered, gripping my arm. "Who the hell is this?" I checked the phone again. No reply, no trace of the sender. Just the black king chess piece staring back at me. Whoever they weren't sloppy. They were calculated, precise. And they had just let us know. They were in control. For now, a call from the past, we needed answers. Fast. I made a call. Not to the police, not to the FBI, to someone outside the system. His name was Liam Carter, an ex-intelligence analyst who had gone dark years ago. A hacker, a fixer, a man who knew how to find the people who didn't want to be found. He owed me a favor. "Liam," I said when he finally picked up. A pause. Then a low chuckle. Well, thought you were dead, mate." "Not yet," I muttered. "But someone's working on it." I sent him the message. The photo. He went quiet for a long time. Then, "Jesus Christ." "What?" Kate asked. Liam's voice dropped to a whisper. "This isn't just any network. You're in deep. Real deep." I gritted my teeth. "Tell me what you know." Liam hesitated. Then he said two words that made my blood run cold. The Order. The Order. Had heard whispers before. Conspiracy theories. Underground forums. An organization that operated in the shadows, pulling strings at the highest levels. Government, corporations, law enforcement. No official name. No faces. No trails. Just the Order. Martin was small-time, Liam continued. A mid-level fixer. But he worked for someone above him. And those people? They don't forgive. They don't forget. Kate's face was pale. And now they know we're alive. Liam exhaled. If they're sending messages, it means one thing. A pause. They're not coming to warn you. They're coming to clean up. The hunter becomes the hunted. The next 24 hours were a blur. We ditched our phones, burned our credit cards. We moved like ghosts, never staying in one place too long. But it didn't matter. The Order was already ahead of us. We checked into a motel that night. A cheap, nameless place off the highway, and that's when I saw it. A black SUV parked outside, its engine running. Kate grabbed my wrist. "They found us." We had two choices, run or fight. I looked at Kate. We were done running. I reached into my bag, pulled out the gun I had taken from Martin. Kate nodded. "Let's end this." The end game begins. We stepped outside into the cool night air. The SUV's headlights flicked on. The passenger door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, suit pressed, eyes cold as steel, and he smiled. "Mr. Carter," he said smoothly. "Mrs. Carter." He knew our names. "Who are you?" I demanded. The man didn't answer. He simply held out a phone. It rang. I hesitated. Then I took it. A voice came through the speaker. Calm. Calculated. You've been very entertaining, the voice said. But playtime is over. I clenched my jaw. Who are you? A chuckle. You can call. Me the king. The line went dead, and the real game had just begun to be continued. After that fateful confrontation at the factory, Kate and I thought we'd at last found a moment's respite. But in the game the king played, there were no breaks, only calculated moves, a momentary shelter in a forgotten safe house on the city's edge, an old, dilapidated warehouse converted into a refuge by an acquaintance long in the habit of disappearing. We finally sat down to plan our next move. Kate's eyes, still haunted by the echo of that menacing call, searched mine. Who the hell is the king and why are we his targets? She whispered. I shook my head. We've been chasing shadows since the night at the factory, but now we need solid ground, a plan to unmask the puppet master behind the order. Phone buzzed, a secure line from Liam Carter. I answered in a hushed tone. Liam, it's me. We need every scrap of info you've got. His voice came low and urgent. Listen carefully. The king isn't just a name, it's a title. Rumors in the dark corners of the net say he's also known as the architect, someone who designs chaos from behind layers of false identities. I've been tracking signals. They're getting murkier, and I believe someone from within our safe circle might have been compromised. Kate's grip on my arm tightened. Compromised? You mean one of our own? Possibly, Liam replied. I intercepted chatter suggesting that a mole is feeding the order information, possibly even about the burner phone evidence. Without that, our leverage evaporates. The weight of his words pressed on me. Our only tangible proof, Martin's phone, with its trove of incriminating messages, had vanished from our secure storage just hours before Liam's call. Betrayal in the shadows. No sooner had we hung up than a faint but distinct rap echoed from the door. I motioned for Kate to stay silent as I crept toward it. There, taped to the battered wood, was a note in bold, deliberate script. You think you're the hunters now? Trust no one. The king is watching. My heart pounded. I showed the note to Kate. She's right, I murmured. Someone in our circle has betrayed us. Determination hardened my voice. We set a trap. We let them think we're desperate, enough to meet. But this time, we're not alone. Kate nodded, her eyes flashing with defiant resolve. Let's feed them a line. We'll arrange a bogus meeting, tell them we're delivering the evidence, and we'll record every word. The trap is set under cover of darkness. We broadcast a secure message. Meeting with the king's envoy. Warehouse district, midnight. Evidence in hand. We both knew the bait was irresistible. Within minutes, our phones buzzed with confirmations. And then the sound of tires outside, again that ominous black SUV, huddled behind a stack of discarded crates. Kate and I listened as footsteps approached our temporary door. A gruff voice spoke through a concealed speaker. Your move was bold. Now show us the evidence. I clutched the empty spot where the burner phone had been kept. It's here, I lied, forcing calm into my tone. Step out. We're ready. Seconds later, the door burst open. Two figures in dark attire rushed in. One of them, a wiry man with eyes like cold steel, lunged toward me. I sidestepped and exchanged a few rapid blows, the sound of fists and grunts mingling in the dim light. Kate, ever resourceful, maneuvered behind the assailant, subduing him with a swift kick that sent him sprawling. Before I could gain full control of the situation, my phone vibrated. A new message, stark and chilling. Checkmate isn't the end, it's the beginning. The words sent shivers down my spine. As I stared at the screen, the masked intruders froze. Their expressions, hidden in shadow, betrayed a mixture of surprise and fury. In that charged moment, I realized our trap had worked, but we were still dancing on a knife's edge. Unraveling the web with our attackers momentarily detained, we forced a confession. Under the harsh beam of a flashlight, the wiry man spat out fragmented details. I'm sorry. They said, the king wants what's ours. He knows about the phone. He said he'd replace it with something far more valuable. Kate's voice trembled as she demanded, "Who are they? Who's behind you?" The man hesitated, fear evident even in his muted tones. The architect. They call him the king, but there's more. A higher echelon, someone always watching. You're not the only ones being played. The words reverberated in my mind. Every layer of deceit seemed to fold into another secret, deeper than the last. A desperate decision. In that grim moment, we had a choice. Run further into the labyrinth of betrayal or turn the tables on the order. I looked at Kate, our eyes locking, in silent understanding. We couldn't continue as fugitives forever. The evidence, the messages, and our very lives were at stake. "I'm calling Liam back," I said, determination etched in every word. "We'll compile what we have, and we'll expose the Order's network. We can't let them erase us without a fight." Kate and I found ourselves huddled in a run-down diner on the city's outskirts, where a single flickering neon sign cast uneven shadows on cracked vinyl seats. In the back booth, Liam Carter waited, eyes narrowed as he spread out a series of encrypted files on the scarred table. "I've managed to decrypt part of the king's message," Liam began in a low, urgent tone. "There's a clandestine gathering tonight, an exclusive meeting of high-ranking officials. The Order plans to use it as the stage for an assassination. Once chaos erupts, they'll spin a tale to cover their tracks. But if we can get inside, record everything, and leak it to trusted channels, we might not only stop the hit, but also expose their entire network." I leaned forward. "So, what's the play?" Liam's voice dropped even further. "We infiltrate the estate where the meeting is held. I have a contact inside who can trigger a diversion, but there's a complication." Kate's eyes flashed with apprehension. "Complication?" she echoed. Liam sighed. "There's strong evidence suggesting that a mole exists within our inner circle. Someone's been feeding the Order details about our moves, possibly even about the burner phone evidence we lost." My heart pounded. I exchanged a troubled glance with Kate. "Do you have any idea who?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Liam hesitated. "I'm still analyzing the trails, but all signs point to someone very close. Trust right now is a dangerous luxury." Kate's hand trembled as she gripped the table edge. I can't believe someone I trust could betray us," she murmured. I reached over and squeezed her hand. "We'll get through this, but first we need to stop the king's plan." Just then, my phone buzzed with a secure message. The screen displayed coordinates and a time. "The show begins at 2200. Prepare for a long night." I showed it to Liam. He frowned. "This might be an independent test from the king to see how far you'll go, or a diversion meant to mask his true intent. Either way, our window is narrow." As we stepped out into the chilly night, the city around us seemed to hold its breath. The looming threat of betrayal mingled with the danger of what awaited us at the estate. Under the stark glow of a solitary street lamp, Kate whispered, "Could someone we trust really be working against us?" I replied, "In times like these, the only thing you can trust is that nothing is as it seems. We need to be alert. Every step, every conversation might hide a secret." Back at our safe house, Liam's voice crackled over a secure line. "Your extraction point is ready. Once you're inside the estate, upload all evidence immediately. Timing is everything." I took a deep breath and looked at Kate. "Remember, no matter what happens tonight, we do this together. We expose them and reclaim our lives." Kate nodded firmly, her eyes now a mixture of fear and fierce resolve. Let's do it. The clock ticked relentlessly toward 2200. Every second the stakes mounted. Outside, the city lay unsuspecting, its silent streets belying the storm that was about to break. Just as I stepped out into the darkened alley, my phone buzzed one last time, a secure message from the king. Your move. My pulse quickened as I stared at the message. The game had escalated far beyond what we ever imagined, and tonight, every secret, every betrayal would be laid bare in a confrontation that left no one unscathed. With the weight of the coming night heavy on our shoulders, Kate and I moved toward the unknown, ready to confront the order and unmask the traitor in our midst. To be continued. At exactly 22 Quas, Kate and I slipped through a side service entrance of the estate, a sprawling mansion fortified with silent alarms and vigilant security cameras. Every step felt measured, each breath laden with the weight of the impending confrontation. According to Liam's earlier instructions, we were to record the secret meeting taking place in one of the mansion's opulent, dimly lit conference rooms. We believed that evidence of the Order's crimes and the identity of our traitor lay hidden in the murmurs of that clandestine gathering. We crept down a narrow corridor lined with antique portraits and heavy locked doors. In a discreet alcove near the meeting room, I set up a compact recording device while Kate kept watch. The atmosphere was thick with tension, as if the very walls knew our presence. Soon, muffled voices drifted through the door. Inside, a group of sharply dressed figures gathered around a long mahogany table. Their conversation was low, deliberate, a mix of cryptic references and cold commands. I strained to catch every word. Then, amid the coded chatter, a phrase made my heart freeze. And make sure Liam Carter pays for his betrayal. Kate's eyes widened as she exchanged a look with me. Our trusted informant, our only lifeline in this labyrinth, had been compromised. The traitor among us was now clearly in the crosshairs of the Order. Before I could signal Kate to start recording, the heavy wooden door creaked open. One of the conspirators stepped out, eyes scanning the darkened corridor. In that split second, a chill ran down my spine. We had been discovered. The betrayal. Unveiled, a masked figure emerged from the shadows, and as the light caught his face, my heart sank in disbelief. It was Liam. His usually steady gaze was now hard and unyielding. Surprised. To see me? He said, voice low and edged with regret. Liam? I managed, voice trembling between anger and hurt. You were the one we trusted. Kate stepped forward, her tone accusing. Explain yourself. Why would the Order target you? Who are you working for? Liam's eyes darted between us. I never wanted it to come to this. They had my family. I was forced into cooperation. Every bit of intelligence I passed on was under duress. His voice cracked, torn between loyalty and survival. I tried to warn you, but I couldn't control everything. I felt a surge of betrayal mixed with the bitter taste of fear. So, all those nights? All the misinformation? You led them straight to us. A harsh laugh echoed behind us. Silence, a commanding voice ordered from deeper within the corridor. The masked conspirator in the tailored suit stepped forward. The king doesn't tolerate disloyalty. Liam's defection has endangered us all. For a moment, the room held a terrifying stillness. Then, chaos erupted. A scuffle broke out between the Order's henchmen and the few who sensed our intrusion. Amid the confusion, I grabbed Kate's hand. We had to act, now. The narrow escape Kate and I dove into the fray, the recording device clutched tightly in my hand. I shoved aside a startled guard, and Kate disarmed another with a swift, precise kick. Meanwhile, Liam's conflicted eyes flickered with remorse as he hesitated between joining his would-be captors or aiding our escape. In that fraught moment, he murmured, I'm sorry. I never meant for you to get caught up in this. But before we could get any answers, a volley of shouts and the pounding of heavy footsteps signaled that our window was closing fast. I yelled, "Kate, this way!" As we dashed down another corridor, the sound of pursuit echoing behind us. Though mansion's labyrinthine passages became our battleground. Doors slammed, alarms began to wail in the distance. Outside, a storm was brewing, a relentless downpour that masked our frantic footsteps as we raced toward an emergency exit. Through the torrential rain, we finally burst into a side street, hearts hammering and our pulse pounding in our ears. We didn't stop running until the mansion and its malevolent secrets were nothing more than a dark silhouette in the distance. Shattered trust and a glimmer of hope. In the safety of a deserted parking garage, Kate and I huddled together. My fingers trembled as I played back the recording on my phone. Every word confirmed the unthinkable. Liam Carter had betrayed us under duress, and the order's true intentions were far darker than we'd imagined. Kate's voice was barely a whisper. "We need to expose them. Every name, every operation. This evidence is our only chance to bring the order down." I nodded, swallowing hard. But first, we need to decide what to do about Liam. His information may be our only lead to dismantle the network, yet he's been our weakness. The ethical weight of the decision pressed down on us. Could we trust a man forced into this web of coercion? Or was his betrayal too deep to forgive? I knew one thing for sure. We couldn't let the king's orders go unanswered. The storm outside raged on, a perfect backdrop to the war we were about to wage. Kate and I sat in a dimly lit hotel room, the curtains drawn, laptops open. The air between us was thick with tension, the kind that settled in when there was no turning back. The recording of the orders meeting lay on the table between us, our single greatest weapon. Liam had betrayed us, but his remorse had been genuine. Whether or not that would be enough to redeem him, I didn't know. What I did know was that the king was watching. Every step we took, every plan we whispered, every shadow we dared to move in, he was there, waiting, calculating. Kate broke the silence. "We need to release the recording," I nodded. "Agreed. But not just anywhere. If we upload this to the wrong place, the order will bury it before it sees the light of day." I thought for a moment, then turned to Kate. "We need a broadcast, something undeniable. We go straight to the public." Her eyes widened. "You mean hijack a media station?" I exhaled slowly. "Exactly. The plan takes shape. Liam had given us the address of an underground journalist, someone who had spent years exposing corruption and surviving the fallout, a woman named Evelyn Carter. Whether she was related to Liam, I didn't know, but she was our best shot. We drove through the rain-slicked streets, adrenaline pumping with each passing intersection. As we pulled up outside a nondescript brownstone, a security camera flickered above the doorway. I knocked twice, then 3 times, Liam's instructions. A moment later, the door cracked open, and a woman in her late 40s peered out. Her sharp green eyes raked over us, analyzing. "You must be desperate," she said. "That's the only reason anyone knocks on my door." "We have evidence," I said. "Proof of a conspiracy that goes deeper than you can imagine." She arched a brow. "I can imagine plenty." Kate stepped forward. "This is life or death. The order is planning something massive, and if we don't act now, they'll erase everything, including us." Evelyn studied us for a long moment, then sighed. "Come inside and wipe your feet. I hate wet floors." The broadcast begins. Evelyn's setup was impressive. Multiple servers, firewalls stacked like layers of armor, and direct uplinks to networks that could bypass the order's control. "This is risky," she warned as we uploaded the recording. "Once I send this out, you'll have no more shadows to hide in. They'll come for you. Hard." Kate met my gaze, unflinching. "Let them come." With a final keystroke, Evelyn began the upload. The screen flickered with the progress bar, 20%, 40%, 60%. Then The power cut out. The entire room plunged into darkness. A heartbeat later, red emergency lights flickered on. Evelyn cursed. They found us. They're trying to shut us down remotely. A shudder passed through me. The king wasn't just watching. He was here. A buzzing sound filled the air. Our phones. I glanced down. A single message flashed on my screen. Nice. Try. Kate's voice was barely a whisper. We need to move. I turned to Evelyn. Can you finish the upload? She was already typing furiously. I can reroute the data, but we need to buy time. If they've traced us here, we're sitting ducks. Outside, tires screeched to a halt. Heavy footsteps pounded toward the door. I grabbed my gun. Kate did the same. We had exposed the order. Now we had to survive it. The final stand. The first explosion rocked the building, shattering the windows. Smoke filled the air. The order had arrived, and they weren't here to negotiate. I grabbed Kate's hand. Run! Bullets tore through the walls as we sprinted toward the emergency exit. Evelyn stayed behind, fingers flying over the keyboard. Go, I'll finish the upload. I hesitated. Evelyn, she gave me a fierce look. I've spent my life fighting these bastards. Go! We had no choice. Kate and I burst through the door, diving into the alley as another explosion tore through the brownstone. The night swallowed us, but the war was far from over. The world would see the truth. And the king, he would see us coming, to be continued. Dawn broke with a tremor, one that wasn't felt in the quiet streets, but in the hearts of everyone who had just witnessed the unmasking of a vast criminal network. Across the nation, screens flashed images of the explosive broadcast, damning evidence, secret meetings, and names that once lurked in the shadows now paraded before a stunned public. Aftermath in the shadows. Kate and I had barely found a moment's respite in a dilapidated safe house on the city's edge. The broadcast, miraculously completed by Evelyn's backup servers before the power had been cut, had spread like wildfire. News tickers, social media, and covert channels buzzed with the scandal. Yet with victory came a heavier burden. The order was reeling, and in retaliation, the king had promised a new reckoning. In the dim light of our hideout, Kate's eyes shone with both relief and dread. Look at this, she whispered, scrolling through her phone. The whole world is watching now. They're calling for accountability at every level. I nodded, though the victory felt hollow. But our victory isn't complete if the king's still pulling the strings. And his message, it means they're planning something even bigger. Before I could add more, my phone buzzed with a fresh cryptic message. The world trembles, yet the true reckoning is only beginning. Find the truth where betrayal was born. A new ally in the dark, we barely had time to absorb the threat when a soft knock echoed at our door. I peered through a peephole to see a figure, a woman with steely determination in her eyes. Opening the door just a crack, I asked, "Who are you?" She replied in a hushed tone, "I'm Mara. I used to work inside the order. I know things, secrets, that even the king fears. I'm here to help you finish what you started." Kate's grip on my arm tightened as I hesitated, weighing our options. Trust was scarce now, but the urgency in Mara's voice was undeniable. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. Inside, Mara spread out a map marked with cryptic annotations and dates. The broadcast was only the tip. The real betrayal runs deeper. There's a facility, an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city, where the origins of the order were born. If you can get there, you might find the final piece, the identity of the mastermind who's been orchestrating every move. The puzzle of Liam. Just then, our secure line buzzed again. It was Liam. His voice, heavy with remorse and urgency, cut through the tension. "Listen, I've been tracking further leads. My betrayal was never complete. Under duress, I fed you limited intel, but I held back what I knew about the facility. It's not just a warehouse. It's a front for their deepest operations. And there's a name linked to it that will shock you." My pulse pounded. Liam, we don't have time for games. Who is it? He hesitated, then said, I can't. Say over the phone. Meet me at the old pier. Tomorrow at 400. I'll explain everything. Kate and I exchanged a wary glance. The lines between friend and foe blurred further with every revelation. The convergence as night fell once again. We gathered our gear and followed Mara's directions to the warehouse. Rain slicked the pavement and turned the city into a labyrinth of reflections and shadows. Every step was a calculated risk, each heartbeat a countdown to confrontation. Inside the warehouse, silence reigned over vast rows of dusty crates and obsolete machinery. Mara led us to a concealed office where files and faded photographs detailed the origins of the order. There, on a battered desk, lay a faded newspaper clipping. My hands trembled as I read the headline, Local Philanthropist or Shadow Puppeteer, The Curious Case of Raymond Blackwell. Kate's eyes widened in disbelief. Raymond Blackwell, he was one of the city's most respected figures. A man we all trusted, Mara continued. Raymond wasn't just a philanthropist. Beneath his charitable deeds, he was the founding father of the order, a man who built an empire of influence by exploiting trust and loyalty, and he's been orchestrating everything from behind a veil of respectability. At that moment, my phone vibrated with another message from the king. Truth is a double-edged sword. Will you wield it wisely or will it cut you down? The reckoning approaches in that dim, musty room. The gravity of our discoveries crashed over us like a tidal wave. We now held the key to unmasking the true mastermind behind the treachery, a man who had manipulated lives from a position of power and respect. The broadcast had ignited public outrage, but this revelation promised to shatter the very foundation of the order. Kate's voice was resolute despite the fear. We expose him, once and for all. Every secret, every lie. It's time the world knew the truth. I steeled myself, glancing at Mara, and then at the evidence before us. Tonight, we plan our next move. Tomorrow, at dawn, we send everything to every major outlet, every whistleblower, network. And we warn those who dare to oppose us, the kin. At dawn, we huddled in the safe house, our temporary refuge that now pulsed with the weight of our final gambit. On the scarred laptop before us, the damning evidence against Raymond Blackwell and the order was cued, set to broadcast live and shatter the veil of corruption once and for all. Kate's eyes met mine with unspoken resolve. This was our moment to seize the truth from the jaws of treachery. Before we could press send, the fragile silence was torn apart by the shattering of glass. The sound of breaking windows and splintering wood echoed through the room. I barely had time to yell, "Get down!" as armed figures burst inside, their silhouettes harsh against the early light. Bullets rattled the walls. In the ensuing chaos, Kate frantically scrambled to secure the laptop, ensuring the transmission would go out even if we lost control of the room. I dropped low behind a battered metal cabinet, firing a warning shot into the air. Amid the frantic commotion, Mara, who had joined our cause with insider secrets, dove for the rear exit. Then, as if summoned by our desperate defiance, a tall figure in a dark tailored suit emerged from the shadowed doorway, the man known only as the King. His eyes were cold and calculating, a twisted smile curving his lips. "So, you thought you could outmaneuver me?" he sneered, his voice slicing through the clamor like a razor. A sharp pain exploded in my shoulder, and I instinctively dove for cover. The King's men advanced with chilling precision, their weapons raised. In that critical moment, a glimmer of hope materialized, movement in the corridor. It was Liam, the traitor whose loyalty had wavered, now reappearing with a ferocity that defied his past missteps. "I'm here to hold them off," he shouted, his voice raw with determination as he returned fire, buying us precious seconds. Between the deafening blasts and the clamor of struggle, Kate managed to revive the broadcast connection. The laptop's screen flickered, then illuminated with the live feed, our evidence streaming for the world to see. Just as our resolve reached its apex, a thunderous explosion rocked the safe house. The force of it sent shards of debris and sparks scattering like fireflies in the murk. Through the swirling smoke, the king's voice resonated with chilling calm. "This is only the beginning." His laughter, cold and remorseless, mingled with the sounds of chaos and distant sirens. Blood seeped from my wound as my vision blurred. I clutched Kate's hand as if anchoring myself to reality. In that fleeting moment, as the broadcast went live and the truth cascaded onto every screen across the city, I realized our battle had only just begun. With the final evidence exposed for the world to scrutinize, and the king's ominous promise echoing in our ears, Kate and I braced ourselves. We were battered but unbowed, bound together by a resolve that no amount of darkness could snuff out. And as the world woke to our revelations, I couldn't help but wonder what price freedom would. Demand next, to be continued. The explosion had ripped through the safe house like a violent storm. In the aftermath, the building smoldered in a chaotic haze of sparks and shattered glass. I awoke in a haze of pain, the sting of blood and smoke filling my senses. Kate was there at my side, her face streaked with tears and soot, her arm bandaged, but her eyes burned with fierce determination. "Are you with me?" I rasped, struggling to sit up despite the searing ache in my shoulder. Kate squeezed my hand. "We have no choice. They're not finished with us yet." Escape into the night outside, the rain had turned into a relentless downpour, washing away the last remnants of our hideout's sanctity. Sirens wailed in the distance, and the streets pulsed with the chaos of a city caught between revelation and retribution. Liam's muffled shouts echoed somewhere in the darkness, his fate uncertain, his loyalty now a question mark we had to answer later. "We need to move now," I urged, supporting Kate as we stumbled into the alley. Every step was a battle, against exhaustion and the relentless pounding rain. The broadcast was live, our evidence splashed across every screen. Yet that very victory had painted a target on our backs. The king's promise still reverberated in my ears. "This is only the beginning." A new ally in the shadows. We ducked into a narrow side street, our hearts pounding in sync with the flashing red and blue lights off in the distance. A dark sedan rolled to a stop nearby, and a gruff voice called out, "This way, if you want to live." Emerging from the car was Officer Ramirez, a man whose weathered face bore the scars of too many battles against corruption. "I've been tracking the order from the inside," he whispered urgently, as he ushered us into his unmarked vehicle. The broadcast ignited public outrage. "You forced their hand, but the king isn't one to surrender without a fight." As the car sped through rain-slicked streets, Ramirez filled us in on the latest developments. A task force had been activated, and several high-ranking officials were now under intense scrutiny. But even as the tide began to turn, whispers of the king's next move sent chills down our spines. The king's last words. In a moment of brief respite at a hidden safe house provided by Ramirez, I checked my secure phone. A new message flashed on the screen. A single, ominous line. "You exposed the truth, but I control the narrative. Your next move will be your last." Kate's eyes met mine, a mixture of fear and resolve swirling within them. "We've pushed them into the open," she said softly. "But now we're playing their game." I nodded. "We need to regroup, find Liam, and figure out exactly what the king's next move is. If we can stay one step ahead, we might yet dismantle this network of betrayal for good." Officer Ramirez's voice broke through the tension. "There's been a development. A trusted contact in the media is rallying support for a full-scale investigation into the order. They're calling it Operation Final Exposure. If you can provide any more evidence, or if Liam turns up alive, it could be the turning point we need." A glimmer in the dark in that fragile moment, as thunder rumbled in the distance and the city's chaos continued unabated, we realized that every loss, every betrayal had led us here. The evidence was out, the people were awakening, and our once hidden war was now a battle for the soul of a city. The king's empire of shadows trembled under the weight of truth. I looked at Kate, her determined gaze mirroring my own resolve. "We're not finished yet," I murmured. "We're going to find Liam and bring down the king, no matter what it takes." As the night deepened and the storm began to subside, a cold, hard resolve settled over us. In the fallout of shattered secrets and burning lies, a new chapter of our fight was about to begin. And somewhere, in the labyrinth of power and betrayal, the king was already planning his next move. To be continued. At the break of dawn, our makeshift alliance converged on the industrial complex that had long served as the king's hidden stronghold. The world had already been shaken by our broadcast, and the ensuing public outrage had forced law enforcement into action. Now, with federal agents and a determined task force led by Officer Ramirez surrounding the building, the stage was set for the ultimate showdown. The calm before the storm. Inside. The cold concrete corridors of the complex. Every step we took echoed with both dread and resolve. Kate's hand trembled slightly as she checked her bandaged arm, yet her eyes burned with unyielding determination. "I never imagined I'd be fighting in a place like this," she murmured, more to herself than to me. I squeezed her hand. "We're here because we demanded the truth, and today we finish what we started." Ramirez's voice came through our earpieces. "All units, move in. Remember, no unnecessary force. We have evidence on our side." Every heartbeat was a countdown. The tension in the air was palpable, like the silence right before a storm breaks. Confrontation. In the shadows as we navigated the labyrinth of abandoned rooms and narrow hallways, a figure emerged from the gloom. A tall silhouette, his presence exuding an icy authority. It was the king, his eyes glinting in the weak light as he stepped forward, flanked by a small cadre of his most loyal enforcers. A bitter smile curled on his lips. "So, you finally decided to play your final move?" he drawled, his tone mocking. Squared my shoulders and stepped into the light, my voice steady despite the pain in my shoulder. "Your empire was built on secrets and lies. Today, we bring it all into the light." The king's laugh was low and mirthless. "You think a few recordings and leaked files can undo decades of power? You're naive." Before he could continue, Kate raised her phone and played a meticulously compiled montage, documentary-style footage, confidential emails, and witness testimonies that traced every shadow of the order back to him and his master puppeteer, Raymond Blackwell. The evidence was undeniable and relentless. For a suspended moment, the corridor held its breath. Then, as if on cue, the agents poured into the room. The king's enforcers scrambled, and in the ensuing chaos, he tried to retreat deeper into the maze of corridors. "I think not," I called after him, firing a warning shot that ricocheted off a steel beam. With nowhere left to hide, the king halted. His icy mask of superiority faltered as he realized the net had closed in. The endgame officer Ramirez and his team moved in swiftly. Amid the disarray, one of the agents secured the king with handcuffs, while another escorted a visibly defeated man toward the exit. In that tense instant, I couldn't help but recall Liam's sacrifice, a man whose torn loyalty had eventually paved the way for this reckoning. His final message and the risk he took to pass on that critical evidence would not be forgotten. Kate's voice broke the heavy silence. "It's really over," she whispered, disbelief and relief mingling in her tone. I exhaled, the weight of years of betrayal and pain lifting ever so slightly. It's over, for him and his network. But remember, our fight for justice never truly ends. Today we showed that truth can shatter even the darkest empires. As the agents led the king away, the broadcast continued to stream live, every screen, every handheld device flashing the evidence of corruption and the dramatic downfall of a man who had hidden behind respectability and power. Across the city, and indeed the nation, the tide was turning. High-profile resignations and indictments began to follow in the immediate aftermath. A new dawn later that day, as the sun climbed above the horizon, Kate and I stood on a quiet overlook far from the chaos. The city below was in turmoil, but also in the midst of transformation, a collective awakening born from the courage of those who dared to expose the truth. Kate rested her head on my shoulder. "We lost so much to get here," she said softly. "But today, we reclaimed our lives, and maybe even a piece of justice." I nodded, watching the sun bathe the skyline in golden light. Every secret, every betrayal has led us to this moment. And now, we have the chance to rebuild, this time, with honesty and accountability. In the distance, the echo of sirens and murmurs of change mingled with the soft rustle of the morning breeze. The king's reign was over, and with it, the sinister grip of the order began to crumble. The world had witnessed the power of truth, and though scars would remain, they would serve as a reminder that even in the darkest betrayals, the light of justice can prevail. And as we embraced the uncertain promise of a new day, I silently vowed that no secret, however deep, would ever again hold us captive. The end. The name Vincent Marlowe haunted me. It was nowhere in the files we had previously exposed, no leaked documents, no intercepted messages, just a whispered specter lurking in the cracks of the Order's fallen empire. If he truly was the puppeteer, behind it all, we had merely cut off the head of a hydra. Kate leaned over our scattered notes, her fingers tracing over the name. "There's something different about him," she murmured. "Everyone we've exposed had some public presence. A job, a connection. But this guy? Nothing. It's like he doesn't exist." I exhaled sharply, tension coiling in my gut. Or he exists where no one dares to look. A visit to the dead-by morning, we had a lead, a single cryptic mention of Marlowe buried in an old police report. The document detailed an arson case. From 15 years ago, a corporate building engulfed in flames with all executives presumed dead. But one name was listed as missing: Vincent Marlowe. "What if he never died?" Kate said, her eyes narrowing. "What if he used the fire to disappear?" The address was in the outskirts of the city, an abandoned research facility long since condemned. It was a place of forgotten crimes where memories were left to decay. Ramirez agreed to cover us from a distance, but Kate and I knew this would be our burden to bear alone. The building loomed before us, its charred remains a tomb for secrets never meant to surface. The moment we stepped inside, the air felt thick, like something still lingered. Ash and soot coated the floor, the walls blackened with the scars of a past inferno. Then we found it, a single untouched file cabinet standing amid the wreckage. It was impossible. How had the fire not consumed it? I hesitated before pulling the drawer open, the metal groaning with age. Inside were yellowed documents, ledger books, financial transactions, offshore accounts, all linked to Marlowe. Kate flipped through them, her voice tight. "He never died. He went underground and kept pulling the strings." Then a sound, a single, deliberate click, a tripwire. I barely had time to shout before the explosion tore through the air. The man in the fire. I came to with my head throbbing and my lungs burning from smoke. The explosion had caved in part of the building, debris blocking our only exit. Kate was beside me, coughing but alive. Our escape was quickly becoming a race against time. The fire had reignited, licking at the walls, hungrily consuming the past it had once spared. But then, through the haze of smoke, a figure stood at the far end of the room. A man in an immaculate suit, untouched by the chaos. His face was aged, but his eyes were piercing, a predator's gaze, locked on to me with unsettling stillness. "Vincent Marlowe," I whispered. He smiled. "You should have left well enough alone." He turned to leave, disappearing into the shadows just as flames surged between us, severing our paths. I grabbed Kate's hand. "We need to move. Now!" We barely made it out as the last standing remnants of the building crumbled. We emerged, gasping, onto the cold pavement where Ramirez was waiting. Behind us, the past burned, but the present had never felt more dangerous. Kate looked at me, her face illuminated by the flickering embers. "We found him." I nodded, feeling the weight of what we had uncovered. "And now, he knows we're coming." As sirens wailed in the distance, one thing was clear. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. To be continued. The fire was still raging behind us, but our real war had just begun. Vincent Marlowe was alive. And now, he knew we knew. As Ramirez's car sped away from the ruins, Kate clutched the few salvaged documents we had managed to grab before the fire swallowed everything else. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the magnitude of what we had uncovered. Ramirez's knuckles were white against the steering wheel. "I put out feelers on Marlowe, but there's nothing. No records, no digital footprint, no bank accounts. It's like he exists only in the spaces between shadows." I exhaled, my pulse still hammering. "Then we force him into the light. A name that shouldn't exist." Back at our safe house, we worked through the night, piecing together fragments of data. Offshore accounts, untraceable at first glance, linked to shell companies. Those companies, in turn, funded politicians, law enforcement, private security firms. Marlowe wasn't just a man, he was a ghost empire. One name kept appearing: Orion Holdings. A global conglomerate with fingers in everything from pharmaceuticals to military contracts. But when I cross-referenced it with the order's financials, something chilling surfaced. Orion Holdings had been funding the order for decades. Kate's voice was hoarse. Marlowe never ran from the fire. He built something bigger from it. And now, with the order crumbling, he had everything to lose. An invitation to die at 3 a.m. My phone buzzed. A blocked number, I answered, and a voice I had only heard once, before drifted through the line. Smooth, controlled. "Vincent Marlowe." "You've been busy," he said. No anger, just amusement. I forced my voice to remain steady. "You tried to kill us." A short chuckle. "If I wanted you dead, we wouldn't be speaking." A beat of silence. Then, "Let's be adults about this. You want answers. I want my empire intact. Let's talk." I clenched my jaw. "Where?" Marlowe's voice was calm, but I could hear the trap beneath it. "The Obsidian Club." Midnight. The Obsidian Club. A private, ultra-exclusive bar where deals were made behind closed. Doors and power was brokered with a whisper. Kate met my gaze. "It's a setup," I nodded. "But it's our only chance." Ramirez sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'll have backup nearby, but once you go in, you'll be on your own." I looked at Kate. She was already loading her gun. "We're never on our own," she said. The devil at the table at midnight, we stepped into the Obsidian Club. The air was thick with the scent of cigars and whiskey. Conversations hummed in the dimly lit space, where billionaires and criminals shared drinks under chandeliers worth more than most lives. Then, at the far end of the room, he was there. Vincent Marlowe, sitting at a private table, a glass of dark liquor in hand. He looked amused as we approached, a lion watching two foolish hunters step into his den. "Mr. Carter," he said, swirling his drink, "and the lovely Kate. Sit." We didn't. Marlowe sighed, placing his glass down. "Fine. Straight to business. Then, he leaned forward, his voice lowering. You're standing on the edge of something far bigger than you realize. You think the order was the whole machine? They were nothing but a piece of it. Kate's fists clenched. Then why burn it all? Marlowe smiled thinly. Because sometimes you prune a tree to make it grow stronger. My stomach twisted. You're rebuilding. He spread his hands. Of course, but you, my dear boy, are becoming a nuisance. A single nod from him, and two armed men appeared at our backs. Kate's hand moved toward her gun, but Marlowe tisked. Come now. No need for violence. He slid a sleek black folder across the table. Inside, documents, addresses, names. Marlowe leaned in. His voice was barely above a whisper. Walk away now and you live. Keep digging, and you won't. I met his gaze, my pulse thundering. You're afraid of us. For the first time, his smile faltered. I closed the folder, sliding it back. See you soon, Vincent. We turned and walked out. Behind us, I could feel his eyes burning into my back. This war wasn't over. It was just beginning, to be continued. The night air outside the Obsidian Club felt different now, charged, as if the world itself held its breath. The folder containing Marlowe's offer, an invitation to walk away, felt like a weight in my hand, but it was nothing compared to the heavy realization settling in my chest. Vincent Marlowe wasn't just an enemy. He was the final boss of this twisted game. As Kate and I made our way to the car, my mind raced. The pieces were finally starting to fall into place, but the picture they formed was nothing short of terrifying. The order was only a cog in a far larger, more insidious operation. Is it true? Kate asked, her voice low. Is Marlowe really rebuilding? I took a deep breath. He's not just rebuilding, Kate. He's expanding. The order was the test run. Now he's going global. Kate's eyes were sharp, her mind already processing the implications. So we've only seen the tip of the iceberg? Exactly, I said. But there's something else. He's scared of us. That's why he tried to buy us off. She looked at me, her face hard. We can't let him get away with this. No. We'll go after him, but we need to play it smart. We can't afford to make mistakes now. A deal with the devil. The following days were a blur. Every move we made seemed to have eyes on us. We were followed, monitored. Even Ramirez, usually our most trusted ally, seemed a little more distant, a little less certain. There was no question about it. Marlowe's influence had extended further than we thought. But then, an unexpected ally reached out to us. It was Celeste, the journalist who had helped us uncover the truth about the Order's inner workings. She had been doing her own digging into Marlowe and had uncovered something crucial. We met her in a dim cafe away from prying eyes. I've been tracing Marlowe's moves, she said, leaning forward. And I found something that changes everything. She slid a tablet across the table to us. On the screen was a list of names, all tied to Orion Holdings, all linked to a massive upcoming global summit. Marlowe's trying to solidify his new empire, Celeste explained. He's gathering every major player in his circle at a summit in Geneva. It's a closed-door event, but if we expose it, we could tear his entire operation down. Kate's eyes gleamed with determination. This is it. This is our chance. To end it. I nodded, my mind already working. But we'll need evidence. Everything he's building, every person he's bribed, every politician in his pocket. We need it all. Celeste hesitated, then pulled out another document. It was a list of delegates, names of corporate CEOs, world leaders, and military officials. People who were not just complicit in Marlowe's rise, but actively supporting it. We get this information out to the right people, and Marlowe's summit will turn into a public execution of his empire, Celeste said. I stood, taking the document from her. We'll need to move fast. If we do this right, Marlowe won't just lose his summit. He'll lose his grip on the world he's been building. Betrayal from within is. We prepped for our move. Something unexpected happened. A tip-off came from an anonymous source within the Geneva Summit's security team. It was one of Marlowe's insiders, someone who had grown disillusioned with the power he was helping create. The insider wanted out, and they were offering us a window of opportunity, a short window, to access the summit's inner circles and get everything we needed. It was a risky plan, but if it worked, it could mean the difference between Marlowe's destruction and our own. The night before we were set to leave for Geneva, a call came. It was Ramirez. His voice was strained. "Carter, I don't know how to say this, but..." My heart dropped. "What's going on?" "I've been investigating on my own," Ramirez confessed, "and I've found something. You're not going to like it." "What are you talking about? The tip you're following? It's a trap. Celeste isn't on our side, Carter. She's been working with Marlowe the entire time." I felt the world tilt beneath me. "What are you saying?" "She's the one who tipped off Marlowe about your plan. She's been playing you from the start. She's part of his network." The room spun as I processed the revelation. Celeste, the person we thought was helping us, the one we trusted, had been working for Marlowe all along. Before I could respond, the line went dead. The last gamble. Now everything we thought we knew was turned upside down. Celeste, the ally who had brought us the breakthrough we needed, had been the one pulling the strings all along. The trap she set was too perfect, too well-timed. She had lured us into a position where we were already walking into Marlowe's hands, but we didn't have time to back out. We had to take the final gamble. With the summit looming in Geneva, we were left with only one option: go in, expose everything, and bring Marlowe down once and for all. But the price? We didn't know. If we'd make it out alive. We prepared for the worst, but the night before we were set to leave for Geneva, the weight of everything finally settled in. Marlowe's empire was vast, stretching into every corner of influence, every level of power. And now, as if fate itself had conspired against us, we had been played by the very person we thought was our ally. Celeste's betrayal hit harder than I expected. She had been the one leading us into Marlowe's web, feeding us half-truths and feeding him everything we planned. But we didn't have the luxury of second thoughts. We couldn't back out now. If we did, Marlowe would win, and letting him win was never an option. Geneva, the summit of shadows. The plane ride to Geneva was long and silent. Kate sat beside me, her usual calm demeanor now overshadowed by a quiet rage. I knew what she was thinking. We had trusted Celeste, and now we were walking into a storm we weren't prepared for. But there was no turning back. Once we arrived, the stakes were clearer than ever. Marlowe's summit was being held in a fortress-like hotel, surrounded by layers of security, both official and unofficial. Every delegate, every high-ranking official, every corporate head would be in that building. It was the perfect place for Marlowe to solidify his control, and we were the only ones standing between him and complete dominance. But our plan had shifted. Celeste's betrayal had left us with fewer allies and less information, but it had also presented an unexpected advantage. The element of surprise. We had to be ghosts, move through the shadows, gather the evidence, and expose Marlowe's network before he could silence us. The plan: infiltration. We arrived at the hotel under the guise of diplomats attending the summit. The credentials we had forged weren't perfect, but they would get us inside. We knew that once we were in, we had to move quickly. Our first objective: find the secure vault where all the summit's sensitive files were being stored. If we could access that vault, we could expose the key players and the deals that were being made under the table. Deals that spanned across continents, corrupting governments and corporations alike. As we passed through the grand lobby, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The tension was thick in the air, the weight of every conversation, every glance pressing on us. Marlowe was here, somewhere, hidden in the sea of suits and power brokers. His presence was a shadow over the entire summit. Our plan was simple: infiltrate, gather the files, and get out. But as with every plan we had made in this nightmare, it was bound to go wrong. The unexpected visitor. We were making our way to the restricted wing of the hotel when I felt it, the familiar tug at the back of my mind. Someone was following us. Someone new. I glanced at Kate, her eyes sharp. She caught my look. "We've been compromised," she whispered. Just as we turned the corner, we saw Ramirez. I stopped dead in my tracks. "What the hell are you doing here?" His expression was unreadable, but I could see the tension in his jaw. "I had to come. I couldn't let you do this alone." Kate's eyes narrowed, and I could see the mistrust forming. "How do we know we can trust you, Ramirez?" Ramirez swallowed hard. "I know you don't trust me, but I'm not here to stop you. I'm here because if we don't expose Marlowe now, it'll be too late. I was wrong about Celeste, Carter. She's gone too, far. But we can still take Marlowe down, together." I studied him, my mind racing. There was something in his eyes, something genuine. Maybe he was still a part of the fight. Maybe he wasn't. But at that moment, we had no choice. If we were going to do this, we would need all the help we could get. "All right," I said, nodding. "But we're doing this my way." Ramirez gave a slight nod, and without another word, we moved forward, our plan now a fragile thread between life and death. The vault was just beyond the high-security doors. We knew we had only a short window to access the files before the security systems reset. Ramirez led us down a narrow hallway where the hum of the high-tech locks whispered danger. Once we reached the vault's entrance, Kate started working on the panel. She was fast, her fingers dancing over the buttons, bypassing the security measures with practiced ease. Every second felt like an eternity. Come on," I muttered under my breath. Then, with a soft click, the door to the vault opened. We rushed inside, our eyes scanning the rows of documents, hard drives, and digital storage units. It was a treasure trove of information: deals, contracts, names that tied Marlowe to the highest levels of power, deals that spanned the globe. This was it. This was everything we needed to take him down. I grabbed a hard drive and as I turned to leave, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. We had no time left. The chase. We bolted for the exit, the data secure in my pocket, but we weren't fast enough. As we turned the corner, Marlowe's men AP. The elevator hummed as it descended, the tension thick in the air. My heart raced, my pulse quickened, not from exhaustion, but from the knowledge that we were so close to ending this nightmare. But that feeling, that fragile sense of victory, was quickly replaced by a gnawing uncertainty. We had the evidence we needed to destroy Marlowe's empire, but the escape wasn't guaranteed. The ground floor was only a few moments away, but in those seconds, 100 thoughts raced through my mind. What would we do once we had the data? Marlowe would hunt us down. There was no question about it. Even if we exposed everything, he had the resources to destroy us. I turned to Ramirez, his face grim but determined. "You sure you want to help us? Marlowe won't stop until you're 6 feet under, too." Ramirez's eyes flickered briefly, but there was no hesitation. "I'm already dead in his eyes, but I'm not going to be the one who helps him bury you both." I nodded. "All right, then we stick to the plan. Once we get out, we'll send everything to the media. Live. The world needs to see what Marlowe's been doing in the shadows." Kate, ever calm, checked the chamber of her gun. "We need a clean exit. Fast." The elevator doors dinged open, and we stepped into the hotel lobby, the buzz of voices and clinking glasses still echoing from the summit, the calm before the storm. We hadn't heard any more gunshots, but I knew Marlowe's men wouldn't stop searching for us. They were already here somewhere hunting us down. I led the way, keeping my head down, my jacket pulled tightly around me. Our goal was clear: reach the back exit, get to the car, and then vanish. The clock was ticking, and we had no idea how much time we had before the storm hit. The hunt begins. We made it halfway to the back exit when I saw them, the first two of Marlowe's men scanning the crowd. They had spotted us. Kate reacted instantly. She took cover behind a nearby pillar, raising her gun. Ramirez followed suit, positioning himself next to her. The plan was to fire a few warning shots, create a distraction, and make a break for the back door. I kept my eyes on the two men, my mind calculating the chances. "It wouldn't be easy! Move!" Kate shouted, and we sprang into action. Gunshots rang out almost simultaneously, sharp cracks cutting through the hotel's atmosphere. The first guard fell, but the second fired back, barely missing Kate. The entire lobby went into a panic, guests scattering in every direction. We didn't have much time. The second guard moved to reload, but before he could, Ramirez dove forward, taking him down with a swift shot to the chest. "Go, now!" Ramirez shouted. We ran for the back door, hearing the distant echo of more footsteps closing in. There was no way we could outrun them all, but we didn't need to. We just needed to make it to the car, to safety. The car chase. We burst into the parking lot, breathless, hearts pounding. My mind still raced, calculating every potential escape route, every backup plan we could fall back on. But the truth was, we didn't have a solid plan beyond this. Our car was parked near the back of the lot, right next to an old delivery van. We hopped into it, and I gunned the engine, pulling out into the street just as I heard tires screeching. Marlowe's. Men weren't far behind. Their black SUVs peeled out, coming after us at full speed. The chase had begun. I slammed my foot on the gas, the van lurching forward, tires screeching as we veered through the narrow streets of Geneva. Every corner, every turn was a gamble, but the adrenaline coursing through me kept my mind sharp. Glanced in the rearview mirror. Marlowe's SUVs were gaining on us. They were close. Too close. "Get ready," I said, tightening my grip on the steering wheel. Kate was already aiming her gun out the back window. "I don't think they're in the mood for negotiation," she said, her voice cold, focused. I made a sharp left, cutting through an alleyway. The van lurched, tires screaming in protest, but we managed to slip through the narrow gap. I heard the screech of the SUV tires as they tried to follow, but they were too slow. I smiled. For a moment, we had the upper hand, but I knew it wouldn't last. The final confrontation, we thought we had lost them. Thought we had evaded Marlowe's men. But as we pulled into a secluded area by the outskirts of Geneva, I saw it. A black SUV parked in the shadows waiting, and then the door opened. Vincent. Marlowe himself stepped out, flanked by two of his top lieutenants. He was calm, his steps slow and measured as he approached. "Carter," he said, his voice like silk. "You've made quite a mess of things." I gritted my teeth, gripping the wheel. We had no more tricks, no more moves to make. We were cornered. Kate moved to open the door, but I stopped her with a glance. We weren't walking into this trap. We weren't going to surrender. I looked at Marlowe. "This is over, Vincent. You're done." He chuckled darkly. "Oh, Carter, you thin." The tension in the air was suffocating. Marlowe stood there, his hands slowly falling to his sides, his eyes locked onto mine, his jaw clenched. His empire, the life he had spent years building, was crumbling right in front of him. He knew it. I knew it. And for the first time since I had stepped into this deadly game, I felt something I had never expected. Control. Ramirez stood firm beside me, his gun aimed at Marlowe's remaining guards, ensuring they didn't make any sudden moves. Kate, too, was poised, her eyes sharp and ready. She had always been our wild card, unpredictable and deadly. But now we had the upper hand. Marlowe's silence was unnerving. His gaze flickered between us and the darkened road behind him, as if weighing his options. I could see the war waging in his mind. He was calculating, trying to figure out if there was still a way out of this. But we weren't going to give him one. You think you've won, Carter? Marlowe's voice was colder than I had ever heard it. You're playing into a much bigger game than you realize. You take me down and someone else will step into my place. There's always someone else. His words were like a knife twisting in my gut. I knew it. I knew the system he had created was deeper, more insidious than we could even begin to understand. But I didn't care. Marlowe needed to pay for what he had done, what he had taken from so many, including me. We're not done yet, Vincent, I said, taking a step forward, my eyes never leaving his. I'm not interested in your bigger game. I'm interested in ending this. You're done. Marlowe let out a dark chuckle, shaking his head as if this whole situation was a game to him. You think you can just destroy me, just like that? He gestured to the hard drive in my hand. That's my world you're holding there, Carter. You have no idea what you're dealing with. I don't need to know everything about it, Vincent, I said. I just need to know that you're the one holding the string, and I'm about to cut it. There was a long silence. Marlowe's eyes flashed, the venom in them unmistakable. You have no idea what you're playing with, he repeated, his voice low, dangerous. Then, without warning, he turned his back and started to walk away toward the SUV. The audacity of it, the sheer arrogance, was almost too much. Not so fast, I barked, but Marlowe didn't stop. He walked right past his men, who were still cautiously aiming their guns at us, and opened the door to his vehicle. He stood there for a moment, then slowly turned his head back towards us. You really think you've won? His smile was thin, mocking. Then let's see what happens when the world finds out who's really pulling the strings. In that instant, I understood. Marlowe had a plan, a final trump card. Before I could react, he slammed the door of the SUV shut, and the vehicle lurched forward, speeding off into the night. The calm. Before the storm, we stood there, frozen for a moment. Had we just lost him? Had he somehow outsmarted us at the very last second? My hand gripped the hard drive tighter, but it suddenly felt heavier. Don't let him get away, Carter. Kate's voice cut through the silence, her eyes scanning the now empty road. I didn't need to be told twice. Get in the car. Now, I ordered, heading toward the van. We piled in, adrenaline pumping through my veins. Ramirez quickly got behind the wheel, and I didn't even hesitate before I gave him the command. Follow him. He's got something up his sleeve, and I don't plan on giving him a head start. The chase continues. We race down the empty streets of Geneva, the night air biting as the wind whipped through the cracked windows. The headlights of Marlowe's SUV were still visible in the distance, weaving in and out of traffic, pushing its speed to the limit. He wasn't going to get away. Not this time. Ramirez, take the next turn. We're going to close the gap. I barked, my mind racing with calculations. He nodded and veered off the main road, cutting through a narrow alley. The SUV was still ahead, but we were gaining ground. I don't get it, Kate muttered from the back. Why would he walk away like that? It doesn't make sense. He's not walking away, I said, my voice tight. He's making us think he is. And when we're close enough, he's going to spring something. We've been played before. Don't think this time will be any different. Ramirez's grip tightened on the wheel. We'll catch him. I'm not letting him slip. Away again! And just as we turned another corner, the trap snapped shut. A sudden roadblock appeared, SUV after SUV screeching to a halt in front of us. Black-clad men, guns drawn, emerged from the vehicles, surrounding us on all sides. We had walked straight into Marlowe's final move, the confrontation. I slammed my fist against the dashboard. There was no way out. Marlowe had played us like pawns, leading us into a dead end. We're surrounded, Ramirez muttered, eyes flicking from side to side. As his hands gripped the air was thick with tension. Marlowe's men closed in, their guns still trained on us, but now something had shifted in the way Marlowe carried himself. The smug arrogance that had defined him in every moment up until now had vanished. replaced by a wary, almost cautious demeanor. I could see the flicker of something. Fear? No, it couldn't be. This was Vincent Marlowe. He was always in control, always one step ahead. Or so he thought. "Out of the car," he repeated, his voice flat, his gaze fixed on us. There was no more bravado. I didn't move immediately, my eyes narrowing. Something wasn't right. The phone call he had received had changed everything. "Ramirez," I whispered, not taking my eyes off Marlowe. "Something's wrong." "Don't make any moves unless I say so." Ramirez nodded, his fingers still tightly gripping the steering wheel. He knew that we were teetering on the edge of something bigger than we had anticipated. We had thought the game was over, but the final play was still unfolding. Kate, who had been silent up until now, spoke softly, her voice low and sharp. "He's stalling. This isn't the end. He's waiting for something. Or someone." I turned to her, meeting her gaze. Her instincts were usually right. Then, with a sudden motion, I opened the car door, stepping out into the night. Kate and Ramirez followed suit, each of us moving cautiously, but prepared for whatever came next. The unexpected ally as. We stepped out of the van, Marlowe's men didn't immediately react, as if they were waiting for something. Marlowe, too, didn't move. He simply watched us, his hands tucked in his pockets, but his eyes flickered to the shadows behind him, as if expecting someone else to appear. That's when I saw it. A figure stepping out of the darkness, cloaked, in a long black trench coat. The figure was tall, its face obscured by the shadows of a wide-brimmed hat. But there was no mistaking the presence. It was her, Helen. The woman I thought had left me in the dust. The woman I thought had betrayed me, only to find out she had been working with Marlowe this whole time. My heart skipped a beat. How had she gotten involved in this mess? The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Helen wasn't just some bystander. She was Marlowe's secret weapon, his ace in the hole. She had been the reason for everything, the reason why Kate had been so obsessed with finding me, the reason why our relationship had fallen apart. She had been playing me, just like she had played Marlowe. "Carter!" Helen's voice rang out, as cold and sharp as ever. "I'm afraid you've been too busy chasing ghosts to see the bigger picture." I tried to hide the shock that ran through me. This wasn't how I imagined it ending. "Helen," I said, my voice a mix of disbelief and anger. "You? After everything we've been through?" She gave me a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "You're just like him, Carter. You always think you can fix everything. You never learn." Marlowe's eyes flickered to Helen, then back to me. The tension in the air was palpable, but there was a flicker of triumph in his gaze. "It was her all along," he said, as if revealing the final piece of the puzzle. "She's the one who set everything in motion. Not just with you, no, Carter. She's been my inside person. You really didn't know, did you?" I couldn't believe it. All this time, I had been focused on Marlowe's manipulation, on his empire of lies. But I hadn't seen the one person closest to me had been playing me from the inside. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "What do you want, Helen?" She stepped closer, her heels clicking on the pavement. "I want what's mine, and what's mine is the future. You've outlived your usefulness, Carter. All this time I've been waiting for you to figure it out, but you never did. You were always the pawn in someone else's game." My blood boiled. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The betrayal, the years we had spent together, the moments I thought were real, all of it had been a lie. "I didn't come back for you, Carter," Helen continued, her tone steady, almost patronizing. "I came back to finish what I started. You and your little rebellion. Do you really think you can take down a man like Marlowe? You're out of your depth." I could feel the weight of her words, the weight of the truth crashing down on me. It felt like everything I had worked for, every step I had taken to unravel this web, was slipping away. But there was a fire inside. Me now. One I hadn't felt before. One I couldn't ignore. "You're wrong, Helen," I said, my voice cold. "I didn't come here to take down Marlowe. I came here to destroy you." She smiled, but this time I could see the flicker of uncertainty behind her eyes. It was brief, but I saw it, the smallest crack in her armor. I didn't wait for her to respond. I lunged forward, grabbing her by the wrist. The moment I touched her, she stumbled back, eyes wide with shock. Before anyone could react, I turned to Ramirez. "Now!" The van swerved sharply, tires screeching against the wet pavement as Ramirez floored the accelerator. My heart hammered in my chest, each beat a reminder that everything was on the line now. Helen, Marlowe, the truth. It was all spiraling into something far darker than I had anticipated. Kate sat beside me, her eyes fixed on the rearview mirror, her gun gripped tightly in her hands. "They're coming," she said, her voice low, almost casual, but with a tension that belied her calm exterior. I glanced back. 2 black SUVs were tailing us, their headlights blinding in the rear view, the rumble of their engines a constant reminder that escape was fleeting. We were running out of time. "Ramirez, take the next left," I ordered, my mind racing as I tried to anticipate their next move. He didn't hesitate, swerving onto a side street, cutting through the city's labyrinthine alleys. Every turn, every maneuver felt like a desperate bid for survival. "They won't stop, Carter," Kate said, her eyes narrowing. "Marlowe has too many people. He's not going to let this go." I met her gaze, and for the first time, I felt the full weight of her words. Marlowe was a monster, a man whose empire of lies reached far beyond what we had uncovered. And now, with Helen's betrayal, we were caught in the eye of the storm. "We'll deal with him," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos. "But first, we need to figure out what the hell Helen was really after. A glimpse of the truth." The van lurched forward, bouncing over the uneven cobblestone streets, but the sound of the pursuing SUVs grew louder with every second. We couldn't outrun them. There had to be another way. I glanced at the hard drive, still clutched in my hand, the one that had started this entire mess. Everything. All the evidence, the hidden files. They were all in there. But the truth about Helen's role in all of this still eluded me. What was her end game? Why had she gone this far? She had been so close to leaving it all behind. Yet she chose Marlowe over me, over us. I tried to push the thoughts aside. There wasn't time for this. "We need a place to lay low," I said, my mind running through possible safe houses. "We need to lose them first." Ramirez nodded, veering down. A narrow street that led to a dead-end alley. He hit the brakes just in time, skidding to a halt, narrowly avoiding an overturned dumpster. "Are you sure about this?" Kate asked, her tone skeptical. "We're not exactly in the safest part of town." "I know, but we're not going to outrun them. We'll wait until they get close, then make our move." We sat in the dark, the sound of the SUVs getting nearer. The seconds dragged on like hours. I could feel the sweat gathering at the back of my neck, the sense of inevitability creeping in. Then, I heard it. A single sound that pierced through the tension, a phone buzzing. I fumbled for my phone, half expecting it to be one of the others, Ramirez, Kate, anyone. But when I looked at the screen, my heart stopped. It was an unknown number. My fingers shook as I answered. "Carter," came the familiar voice. "Helen." I could hear the calm in her voice, but beneath it there was a trace of something else. Fear? Regret? Maybe both. "I'm listening," I said, my voice cold. "I don't have time for games, Helen." "I never wanted this, Carter," she said, her voice soft, but with an edge of desperation. "I didn't want to betray you. I thought I could stop it before it went too far, but it's too late now." "What do you mean, too late? What the hell is going on?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Marlowe isn't the one pulling all the strings. Not anymore. I was trying to protect you from the real people behind all of this." My pulse quickened. Who? I can't say over the phone, but you need to know. Marlowe's plans are just a small part of something much bigger, much darker. You've been chasing ghosts, Carter, and now they're chasing you. I felt the ground beneath me shift. Was it possible? Had we been blind to something even worse than Marlowe? I can't help you anymore, Helen continued, her voice trembling. But you need to get out of the city. They'll come for you next. They'll stop at nothing. You can't trust anyone now, not even me. Before I could say anything, the line went dead. I stared at the screen, my mind racing with her words. The final decision. Who was it? Kate asked, her voice low. Helen, I replied, the weight of her words sinking in. She said Marlowe's not the real threat. Someone else is pulling the strings. And we've been in the dark this entire time. Ramirez looked back at us, his brow furrowed. That doesn't make sense. Marlowe's been the one in charge. Who else could be involved? I don't know yet, I said, shaking my head. But if what she said is true, we need to get out of here. Now. I didn't wait for a response. I grabbed the hard drive and opened the van door, stepping into the darkness. We had one shot at this. We needed to find out who was really behind all of this. The man who stepped out of the car was tall, his silhouette cast in the dim light of the alley. He moved with the same deliberate confidence I remembered from our last encounter. Jack Turner, a name I hadn't thought about in months. If anyone could be counted on to turn the tide in a game like this, it was him. But whether that was good or bad, I couldn't yet tell. Carter, Jack's voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of something much darker. He didn't look surprised. To see us as if he had known exactly where to find us. And in a world where trust was a rare commodity, his appearance was both a relief and a warning. What the hell are you doing here? I asked, trying to keep the edge of suspicion out of my voice. I wasn't sure whether this was a rescue or a betrayal. But I wasn't going to make it easy for him. Jack's lips curled into a half-smile. The same smile that always seemed to hold secrets he wasn't ready to share. Funny, I was about to ask you the same thing, but I think I already know. He stepped closer, his gaze flickering toward the darkened street. The sound of Marlowe's SUVs growing nearer echoed through the alley, filling the air with tension. Jack didn't flinch. In fact, he didn't seem fazed at all by the imminent danger. I assume you're the one who's been pulling the strings, I said, narrowing my eyes. If Helen had been telling the truth about someone else controlling Marlowe, then Jack was my prime suspect. He had always been a master of playing both sides. Jack laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. Carter, I didn't pull the strings. I just told you to look closer at the ones who were. You were too busy playing your little detective game to see the bigger picture. I shook my head, frustration mounting. Stop talking in riddles. What do you want from me, Jack? You're still trying to make sense of this, aren't you? His eyes were cold now, and for the first time I realized just how much he had been holding back all this time. Look, Carter, I'm not your enemy. But you've been chasing after Marlowe as if he's the one in charge of all this. He's not. He's a puppet. I've been watching the whole game play out. And guess what? The real players are getting tired of watching you dance. Before I could respond, he gestured toward the van where Kate and Ramirez were crouching, waiting for a signal. You need to get out of here, Carter. Marlowe's about to make his move, and when he does, this entire city is going to burn. Unless you're smart enough to walk away. I was about to ask him more when a familiar voice shouted from the shadows. He's right. Kate stepped forward, her face grim. We need to move. Now. The sound of the pursuing vehicles was deafening. Now the screech of tires signaling that they had us cornered. There was no more time to think, no more time to second-guess our choices. I turned back to Jack, my mind racing. And you? What's your stake in all this? What do you get out of helping us? I don't help people, Carter, Jack replied, coldly, his tone flat. I just make sure the pieces stay in motion. But right now, I'm offering you a chance to stop Marlowe. For good. The question is, are you ready to burn everything to the ground? I didn't hesitate. I couldn't afford to. What's the plan? I asked, stepping closer. Jack glanced over his shoulder, his gaze flicking toward the distant headlights of the approaching SUVs. You trust me, Carter? Because once we go through with this, there's no turning back. I glanced at Kate, then at Ramirez. There was no time to deliberate. We either trusted Jack now, or we faced certain death at the hands of Marlowe's men. I trust you, I said, my voice steady. Jack nodded, then turned back to the black car, pulling out a small, high-tech device from his coat pocket. We don't have much time, but if you want to make it out of this alive, you need to be ready for anything. There's one thing I can guarantee. And that is, I asked, feeling the weight of every decision pressing on me, that when this is all over, nothing will be the same. The final play Jack moved swiftly, his fingers dancing over the device as he typed in a series of commands. A low, humming sound filled the air, followed by a series of rapid beeps. Then, the distant sound of Marlowe's SUVs began to slow, their engines sputtering as if they had suddenly hit a wall. What did you do? I asked, my pulse quickening. EMP pulse, Jack said matter-of-factly. Disables anything electronic within a 500-meter radius. They won't be able to track us or communicate with anyone else, but it won't last long. We need to move now. Kate immediately gave the signal, and the three of us sprinted toward the black car. Jack opened the door for us and jumped in. Last, slamming it shut just as the first of Marlowe's SUVs screeched to a halt behind us. The engine roared to life as we tore down the alley, the EMP having done its work, cutting off Marlowe's men from any way of tracking us. The car raced through the night, Jack's hands gripping the wheel with a quiet intensity. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty roads, but the weight of what lay ahead hung heavy in the air. We were driving blind, not knowing who could be trusted or what kind of trap Marlowe might have set up next. But one thing was clear. There was no turning back. Kate sat next to me in the back seat, her face hard as stone, her eyes scanning the rearview mirror. Ramirez was beside Jack, tense and alert, his hand resting on the door, ready for anything. We all knew that Marlowe wouldn't stop until he had us, and he would come after us with everything he had. What now, Jack? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The uncertainty gnawed at me like the feeling of a storm about to break. Where are we going? What's the next move? Jack didn't answer right away. His eyes were fixed on the road, his jaw clenched, as if weighing something far heavier than just our immediate escape. After a few moments of silence, he finally spoke, his voice as cold as ever. We need to hit them where it hurts, Jack said, his tone flat but determined. Marlowe's empire isn't just built on money or power, it's built on secrets. He's buried so much dirt on people, important people, that even he doesn't know who he's really working for anymore. But I do. I leaned forward, unable to hide the skepticism in my voice. And you think you have the answer? What are we really doing here, Jack? His gaze flicked toward me for a brief moment, an unreadable look in his eyes. I've always known the truth, Carter. But it's never been the right time to show my hand. You've been running around chasing shadows, and I've let you. But now, we don't have the luxury of time. Marlowe has crossed the line, and there's only one way to stop him. A knot formed in my stomach as I heard the finality in his voice. Jack had always been a man of few words, and when he spoke like that, I knew he meant business. But something wasn't right. Why now? Why had he waited so long to step into the picture? The questions I had about Jack, and everything else, kept piling up, but there was no time to sort through them. Do you have a plan? Kate's voice broke through the tension, her sharp tone bringing us all back to the present. Or are we just running around hoping for the best? Jack nodded, his lips curling slightly into a grim smile. You'll see soon enough. The truth behind the veil we drove for what felt like hours, weaving through the outskirts of the city, until we finally arrived at a dilapidated building in a forgotten part of town. The air was thick with a damp, musty smell, and the windows were all boarded up. It looked like a place no one would willingly go. And yet, here we were. "This is where it all ends," Jack muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. I stepped out of the car, the sound of gravel crunching beneath my boots. Kate and Ramirez followed suit, moving cautiously but without hesitation. We had no choice now but to trust Jack, despite the countless questions left unanswered. "What is this place?" I asked, already sensing that whatever was about to unfold would change everything. Jack turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "This is where Marlowe's secrets are buried. I was hoping it wouldn't come to this, but it's the only way." We entered the building, the walls creaking as we walked down the dimly lit hall. The air felt thick with secrets, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. At the end of the hallway, we came to a rusted metal door, the kind that looked as if it hadn't been opened in years. Jack pulled out a key from his pocket, unlocking it with ease. The door swung open with a loud groan. Inside was a room that resembled something between an archive and a vault. Rows of filing cabinets, old computers, and scattered papers filled the space, each one containing names, dates, and documents I had never seen before. But what caught my eye wasn't the room itself. It was what lay on the desk in the center of the room, a series of folders, all labeled with names I recognized. And beneath them, an encrypted hard drive. "This is the key," Jack said, pointing to the hard drive. "The one that connects everything. It has the information that can take Marlowe down once and for all. But be careful. This isn't just a set of criminal records. It's a Pandora's box." I walked toward the desk, my heart racing as I reached for the hard drive. My fingers brushed over it, and I felt an almost electric jolt pass through me. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle. All the lies, all the manipulation, it would all come crashing down. But as I reached for it, something shifted in the air. The door slammed shut behind us, and the lights flickered. "Carter, I wouldn't touch that if I were you," Jack said, his voice suddenly cold. I froze, my hand hovering just inches above the drive. Something in his tone made the hair on the back